One of the most specialized sailing warships was the bomb vessel. Yet unlike most other warships, it was not intended to fight ships. So let's find out what a bomb vessel was and why was it built. Well, for the why, let's look at an ordinary warship of the time. You can clearly see that the cannons are close to the waterline. And additionally, the heaviest guns were placed on the lower decks. This setup wasn't a problem in fighting ships, but if you want to hit something on land, which is usually higher up than the sea, you have a bit of an elevation issue. This is where bomb vessels come in. They were specifically used to attack targets on land like fortifications. And one common way to engage fortifications at that time was with mortars. Thus in the late 17th century, the French started to put mortars on ships for exactly this purpose. The British soon followed and built bomb vessels of their own. Now the problem with mortars was that they were rather large and heavy, so usually only one or two could be fitted on a ship. Besides being heavy, the mortars had another major issue. They were fired at high angles, so the recoil had to be absorbed by the ship's structure, unlike regular cannons that were not fixed to the structure. Thus bomb vessels had to be properly built and reinforced in order to withstand those enormous stresses. As you can see here, a large amount of the ship was taken up by the structure that supported the mortar beds. Due to this reinforcement and the space needed for the large high caliber shells, bomb vessels had even less space for the crews than regular ships. Now the mortar fired an explosive shell, not solid shots like regular cannons. Since this was the age of sail, you can imagine that putting a charge into the mortar and then adding an explosive shell with a fuse was a particularly safe endeavor. The actual operation of firing a mortar was cumbersome. The decks were wetted, a special pump with an inlet through the bottom of the hull being used. Heavy drenched curtains were erected between the decks and in the captain's cabin, where the charges were readied. There is a good reason most historians usually don't use the phrase, the good old times. Yet there were other problems too, due to the size of mortars and necessity of masts and sails, especially early bomb vessels had limited sailing capabilities. The asymmetry of the rig, which in itself went against all rules of balance for sailing vessels, meant that when fitted as mortar vessels, the craft were usually poor sailors. Now the bomb vessels were of course improved over time. Originally, bomb vessels had fixed forward firing mortars installed, so the ship was used for aiming. This was soon changed by the British using swiveling mounts. Additionally, until the early 18th century, the mortar was usually fixed at a 45-degree elevation for maximum range. This of course meant that the positioning relative to the target was quite limited. It is quite interesting that the main advantage of an adjustable elevation was, according to the naval historian Chris Ware, the following. In practice, however, the main advantage of trunnions was that they allowed the mortar to be stowed horizontally when at sea, improving the stability of the vessel. This is probably obvious for people with sailing experience, but for landlubbers like me, this is an interesting reminder that the wind and sea are more treacherous than the plains and hills. Now, although you might not have consciously heard of a bomb vessel before this video, yet very likely you have listened to a piece of music that at least indirectly refers to bomb vessels. Namely HMS Terror and HMS Meteor, because the line "the rocket reds glare and the bombs in the air" from the United States national anthem refers to the bombardment by these vessels in the War of 1812. To summarize, bomb vessels were specialized ships for attacking fortifications and other land targets. In order to do this, they were fitted with mortars, which were larger and heavier than regular cannons. Thus the ships required special reinforcement to sustain the stresses of firing. Due to the position of the mortars and their firing angle, often a rather asymmetric rigging was used, and that reduced stability of the ship. This, in combination with the weight of the mortar, reduced the sailing capabilities of bomb vessels. Furthermore, bomb vessels used explosive shells, thus extensive safety measures had to be taken to prevent pre-ignition. Now, sources are linked in the description. If you want to know why 278 men were needed on a frigate, check out this video, or if you want to learn about naval gunnery in the age of sail, check out this video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.